So this is a beginning of a series that that I'm going to do regarding trauma and especially trauma at a young age and the lasting effects that it can have, um, you know, for the rest of your life. Um, so I'm going to, I think I'm going to title it, "He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not." Um, and I believe, as I was thinking about that, that's that thing where you pull off the petals of the flower, I believe, and then you get to the end one, and I can't remember what, if you pull it off and it, it lines up that he doesn't love you, then he wasn't meant to be, or something. And if you pull it off or whatever, and you're saying he loves you, then well, I guess it's a match made in heaven. I guess it was meant to be. And I almost thought that little story and stuff was kind of like in little books and stuff as a child or something, And for some reason, I always envision girls doing it about a boy, like, oh, he loves me not. I don't. I could be remembering wrong, but I don't ever recall a boy doing that and being like, she loves me not. But maybe it goes both ways. But anyway, that came to my mind because you have you have uh, you have two things there, and it's kind of back to my binary thing. There's no a little bit that he loves you. He either loves you or he doesn't love you. It's kind of interesting just how simple that little verse or whatever is. But as I was thinking about my childhood, because I promise you, I've got I feel really confident to say I've probably spent an entire year of my life, probably more than that, if you add up all the times, trying to process this this relationship with my father. And I think this little verse or whatever, a little nursery rhyme or whatever it is, I think it sums it up the best. He loves me. He loves me not. And I'm not here to tell you that my father did or did not necessarily love me. And I'm not here trying to say necessarily that he did not love me. But I think if we insert the way that I felt through very, 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 very young age, um, I mean, mostly till the day he died, but I'll tell you, it didn't stop after he died. I was haunted by I just cannot come to words with it. I was haunted by his feeling or maybe opinion or judgment of just about everything I did for, I'd say, 20 years after he'd passed away. It was a long, and this is with counseling, lots and lots and lots of counseling. Man, I feel like I wish I could do the math on it to sheer number. Well, let's play with some numbers here lightly. So currently, you know, this is going to make it a little hard maybe for my mind to do, but I see a counselor every week, and we do it. Well, yeah, every week. I was going to say 52 times a week, so that's 52 hours, and I would say you could go back 30 some years So, I mean, right there at that math, if that was the only math, that means I've spent 3/4 of a year of my life in conversation with a counselor about these different issues. I feel the number is much higher because, quite honestly, I've done counseling with pastors, and their sessions are typically a little longer. Like my current one, we don't call them sessions. It's not it's not fancy like that, but right now it's an hour and a half, and I would say they've all been over an hour, and I've had this. Like I said, there's certain memories they're missing, but I want to say I've had them at least 10 years. So put that in there. That number's a little bit bigger because it's not going to be 52 hours. It's going to be more like hour and a half, be 75-ish times that 750. Yeah. I'm not doing a pencil in front of me to write them down, but there's been a ton of it. That doesn't include the countless hours, and I'm not talking like distracted hours where you're doing something else and you're talking to a buddy, and this isn't the topic. I'm talking stop. You're sitting there, and this is the only thing on the agenda. I think that kind of counts as counseling. I can't tell you how many hours there's been of that. And then if you go a little bit further, what about the counseling, if you will, or whatever, the groups and different things, for the amount of times I've been in the clink, or the mental hospital as I call it. I know I've spent at least a year of my life, at least, if you add up the stays. So this gets to be, I hope you see, this is, I don't even know what we're up to. We're like 1, 2 or 3 years of my life. Oh gosh, and I'm not even thinking about high school. And high school was even more because, anyway. Yeah, because I had a state counselor and I had a school counselor, and wow. Anyway, and it hasn't fixed it, not completely. It's numbed it around the edges. There's coping skills. I'm not trying to say that counseling's worthless. No. I'm just trying to illustrate how much damage is done by childhood trauma specifically. When you're just not old enough to process what the heck just went on. And I think as I go through this series of, he loves me not, I think what you'll see is, I think this way is in some ways almost worse. And I'm not saying I want to ever experience, what other people have gone through. Man, there's some bad stuff out there. But that continued being raised in a situation where you felt at times genuine love, at times when you were getting maybe what I would call remorse love. That was at the times when the punishment, there was a guilt felt, by my by the people that were traumatizing me, and then the following step was to I don't know if it was love, show attention, show, well, let's say this, kissing ass, I don't know what to call it, but it wasn't, what I know is it wasn't the other. It wasn't, it wasn't, no, it wasn't the other. It was on the kind of the love side, or the friendly side, or nice side, or the side you'd rather be on. And that's why anyone who's known me and has listened to me, and I've shared, pretty much any of these stories, they've heard this, which is basically I finally learned to step up and admit guilt, even when it wasn't, me that did it. Part of it was to protect my brothers and sisters. Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of the role I end up growing into. But the other part of it was perfect, because it was not perfect. It was better. I don't know what to say. But basically, instead of whatever type of mind game, and we're talking these marathons of mind games, and I hope I can recall some to share with you as the audience of my father was a very, very clever man. But instead of doing whatever mind game for some type of torture, if you will, you admit guilt, and you got beat. You got beaten. And I'm not using that word lightly either. I think we got some that are, they took a, I got a little slap or a little whatever, and now that's a full-fledged beating, Now when the weapon of choice is leaving welts and bruises that stand up taller than the thickness of the item, and we're not talking just one, we're talking multiple on your body, that's a beating. Sometimes it was the belt that he always wore, and there'd be a almost 2-inch wide marks, and they were welts, or they stood up at least the thickness of the belt. I almost think that was his, how he knew when he was done. Or whatever other object it would be. There was many other objects, wooden spoons, spatulas, tree branches. I'd have to think. Yeah. Anyway, that was better, because you would get a beating, and then you could basically go outside and play. And I never really thought about it, but I think probably most of that was, remorse love. Feeling remorse for the thing. And not only did I get to go out and play, usually my brothers and sisters would be able to get to go first, as I'm getting my beating. And I could join them, shortly after. And, basically you would get this beating, you'd pull your, your pants back up, you would, I don't know how, it was always on the back too. But anyway, basically you cover up, that was the next process. And once you could get your tears and snot and everything else under control, and put on your mask, you could go join society, because that little secret stayed behind. It stayed on these sides, this side of the wall of the house. And that's what I finally found to be desirable. I didn't always get the choice. Or I should say, that wasn't always what he dreamed up. Like, that wasn't always the option, which sucked, because then you never wanted these sessions to start too early in the morning. They did, but because that gave all day, for a punishment. But typically the back end of the punishment was when he was going to bed for the night. I don't ever recall it going there, but that could be 10, 1 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, that's so that's going to be the series, and I'm actually going to start out in the very beginning. I want to tell the audience that this is not to shed a bad light on my father or mother or anything like that. My father in particular, I made peace many years ago, and absolutely love him. I was trying to think. I think I loved him all along too. But it is to bring some awareness, and just what went on. Obviously, this is from my vantage point or whatever. So yeah. So you anyone who's watched my videos, that I talked about malt meal and the different cereals. I got cocoa wheats was another one. I got some of that here, and I eat it like crazy, especially when I'm not doing good. Like I said, my wife calls it my comfort food, and yeah, it's just so simple. I should have timed myself. I believe I can cook it on the stove. I'm pretty sure I don't break 3 minutes, but I wonder if I'm below 2 minutes. I think I already did it today, but I think I'm gonna set a timer, because it's the exact same speed that it takes a cup of coffee to come out of these new Keurig or whatever machines. It's and I'm doing that. I'm processing that at the same time, and then you're done. So I mean, man, for something that's warm and fills your belly and makes you kind of feel warm and fuzzy, a little hug from the inside. You can't beat the hot cereals. And there used to be a lot more choices of hot cereals than there are now. Man, there were so many choices. I bet Cream of Wheat had 4 or 5 different choices at any grocery store you would go to. And some of these other ones have come later, the cocoa, I believe, or at least they weren't trendy enough, but there was an off-brand, and I can't think of it, but if you've got the money and you hold your pinky up a little bit, you're proper, then you'll definitely want it. This is slumming it, okay? This is slumming it. But if you got the money, you want to eat Cream of Wheat. That's like the caviar, of hot cereals. But anyway, I've been eating this. I blow through boxes of this cereal. And so the other day, I never looked, but I was like, I was trying to figure out how many boxes I've eaten. So I was like, well, let's do the math. I know I eat 2 servings a day because I don't know who eats 1 serving because there's not enough there. You need like at least 1 1/4. Okay. But anyway, I ate 2 servings. And so I looked at the servings per container and there's 29 servings. So, but if we divide that by 2, that is what, 14 and a half. And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, that's really weird, 14 and a half. And then I remembered that whenever I get down to the bottom of the box and I'm filling up my little 3rd measuring cup, and it's true, it only fills it up like half or 5/8 of the way. And then I grab my cocoa wheats, and I'll top it off. I'll fill it up, and the cocoa wheats is way more potent, like the chocolate. So even though you have like way more of the white one, the chocolate like just it becomes cocoa. It's dominant. But it made me think, why are there 29 servings in the box? Why? Because when I look at the back, oh, that's funny. They've changed the directions. I haven't read them in so many years. I didn't even know they changed them. I'll tell you how the directions used to read. There was servings. Maybe you could see it. See right there. So you had servings, 1, 2, and then it used to be 4. It wasn't this microwave crap. It was 4. 4 was there. So the recipes, whatever, would tell you how to make a 1 serving, a 2 serving, or 4 serving. And neither 2 nor 4 is divisible into 29. Why didn't they make it 30? I don't. That means there's always this odd serving, or could be an odd serving, unless you only had single servings. Anyway, very interesting. So then I looked at the cocoa one. Okay, now that, okay. Oh, and there's room in the box. Like, because this box is only filled like probably here. So they could put 1 more serving in there. Or take a serving away like everyone else does. Because, obviously 28 is divisible too. And see, we have 26. That makes sense. Oh, and here's that chart. If I could stand still, see, 1, 2, 4. They all used to say that, 1, 2, 4. Anyway, and a 1. I don't know who a 1 serving is for. It's too small, and 2 servings, to be quite honest, sometimes is just a little bit much. I think the perfect 1 serving would be between 1 1/4 and 1 3/4. So if you make 2 servings for 2 people, well, then you got 2 people that don't have enough. So, but if you jump to 4 for 2 people, you're gonna scoop some out into the garbage. So, yeah. Anyway, enough on that. We talked about. You guys are like, okay, what? I get your point. Move on. Okay, I will. So let's. So I've always had a really good memory, and I don't know when I first recognized that or realized that I recognized it. But it's been very, very good. And my very first memory is actually I'm pretty sure I would have been just walking or clung to a hip at this point. We were in Iowa, and we were actually in Cedar Rapids at a body shop that my dad worked at. And if anyone's been around auto body, it has a distinct smell, a smell that's unique to its own, and you will never forget it. Like it's the only thing that smells like that. And I clearly remember that smell, and I also remember, and I don't know why they did this as an adult and just know a little bit about life and a little bit about auto body. I don't know why they chose to do this, but when they would mix up their Bondo or whatever, there was different colors. So they must have, guys must have different hardeners or whatever, because there was different colors. But they must have, when they had the leftover, like they filled their hole or whatever, and they're like, oh crap, I made too much. They must have scrapped off whatever, scraped off whatever they were mixing it on, and they put it onto this, like, it was like a tribute, this statue that they just kept, wiping their excess onto it. And I don't know how big it really was, because I was a kid, and I would say it was a foot to 2 foot tall, and I remember that, and I'm pretty sure that is my first memory, because of my father's occupation at the time was that, and because we didn't really go back there. When I carry on with the story, you'll see we never returned, to there. So it has to be my first memory, and that's it. That's all I have. I mean, it's not like I remember the smell, and I remember that little statue, or whatever. So as the story goes, my father beat my mother pretty severely. Okay. Kind of black and blue kind of business going on, like where you couldn't hide it. People noticed. The story goes on that my father, I assume my mother was there, they went to my grandfather, my mother's dad, to discuss it. I don't know. Well, anyway, he told them to take her and me and flee the state, to leave, which seems quite a bit different than how they would do it now. There'd usually be like maybe police and stuff. Restraining orders. I don't know. It just seems like we do things a little different now. But I don't know. That as we go back in time, as society, we looked at things were a lot more secret, private, if you will. There was a lot more shaming the family and all that crap. Image and representation. And so that was the counsel. Go take my daughter that you just beat the shit out of and go start a life with her somewhere. Good luck. I paraphrased that or whatever, because that's kind of how it seems to me. And so they left and went to Utah. And I don't know much about what my dad did for work there. I know I've seen photos. There's like muscle cars and stuff. My side of the family has always been into muscle cars and stuff like that. It kind of stopped. It's not in my generation. Like, it doesn't include me, sideways. It kind of stopped at dad or whatever, but they all had muscle cars and different things. And so there's pictures of me. I believe it was a mobile home that we were living in. And there's pictures of my mom and stuff like that. And like I said, I don't know what either of them did, if anything, for work. I assume they, were working maybe. I do know it was shared with me that they got baptized because they're out in Utah, and they're going to get you. And apparently they, so I assume they were doing all the lessons back then, the six lessons to before you go get baptized. And I also assume that they at least attended some, but just because that's usually how it works. So I have no memory. I'm pretty sure I don't have any memory of Utah, except the next memory when I get to it may have started in Utah, because who knows, it might took hours to get it. You'll see. But anyway, as the story goes, my father, threw me on my hip or grabbed a hand or whatever he did, and was taking me to run to the gas station to pick up smokes. Not for me, for him, and maybe my mom. And what my mom didn't know is that we were never coming back. And I'm not for sure, but I think this is the second time he would be arrested. Right. And maybe a second restraining order. Times they are changing, as Dylan says. So we, I don't remember getting in the car. I'm not going to, be telling you that, but I do have memories of being in this car. I don't know what it is. I can tell you what I remember of the car. Okay, I have memories, and it's from that trip. And I was 2 years old, so I don't know if it was like 2 years, 365 4 days or whatever, or it was 2 years and 1 day. I don't know how I'd find that out. Anyway, in my twos, me and Dad going. And this is what I remember, and it's actually one of my fondest memories of my dad. And I truly felt loved. I don't know that I ever felt a longing or missing from mom. I have no memories of that. But I do know I felt really good in that car, driving with my dad. I just felt loved. There's a lot of memories in that car. For example, these had bench seats, so I'm sure I moved around a lot, but my memory is of on this bench seat is laying on his lap, and looking up at the speedometer cluster, and looking at I remember the glow underneath the dash that must have been coming from the back of the instrument cluster that that illuminated, and just sprawled out on that bench seat, laying on my father's lap. I remember him smoking like a freight train. This is back in the days, and this is not the first and only time that they've tried killing me by smoke in a closed car. Gosh, those were different times. Wait, that's illegal too nowadays, I believe. 3 times getting arrested. Anyway, the rain was just beating down. It was dark. It was nighttime, and it just rained forever. Just forever. I remember the warmth coming off the car and whatnot, and I remember it had an 8-track player, which is crazy, right? I can remember this at, let's say, 2 to 3 years old, but it had an 8-track player, and he was, putting in different 8 tracks and playing, and I don't know if he was singing along or if I would be trying to sing along. I don't know, but I enjoyed it. I can tell you that I very much enjoyed it. And the one album, and maybe because it's just funny looking, is why I've never forgot. But I think it's the group, the Who or what, I don't know, maybe. But it's these guys, and there's like a monument or something. And there must be 3 or 4 of these guys, all dressed in their 70s garb or 60s, whatever. And they're all, pissing on this thing. They're all taking a leak. I don't know if it was in defiance or they just had to go, or I don't know. But that was that's probably stuck in my head But we drove for forever, and so there's that memory. So what happened next? And I have lots of memories from this next part, but they're events, and they're not like when I showed up there. But what Dad did is he went back to his mom and dad's house, so my grandpa and grandma, and they lived in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And although I don't know this firsthand, the story goes that remember, this is different times. We didn't have those AirPod or whatever to locate you. We didn't have we didn't have any of that, no GPS. So my mom back in Utah probably had a phone, or she had to go to a payphone, right? I mean, that's probably payphone. Well, she ended up calling my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, looking for us. And they didn't lie. They didn't say, no, they're not here. They actually told her that, yes, they're here. And I'm not telling you I have the exact wording, but I'm going to give you the gist of it. We stay away. We have all kinds of money or something like that, basically resources, and we will use every means possible to make sure you never see them again. I think that's the gist of it. Okay, well, so I don't know what I can deduce from that. That seems, I'm just kind of thinking, I'm not a grandparent yet, but man, they must not have liked her. Or there must have been more to the story to not like her. I don't know if they knew that my dad had beat her and this different things, like, is he just a saint or what? But hey, that's the story goes. That's what supposedly she was told. Stay away. So my dad, I know the details. I have a very small memory of where my father was working there, and he worked at Holly Farms. And I don't know how I remember that, maybe because Grandma always would say it or what, I don't know. But I remember Holly Farms. And Holly Farms was like a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Hot Springs there. And Dad was going back to school. I assume he already went to school for auto body of some extent, unless you just automatically get to do that. I think he went to school, I think is the story. I'm pretty sure he went to school. But anyway, he was doing night school in a community college, and I don't know if he knew at that time what he was going to be. I don't know. I just tagged along for the ride. There's some pictures with my dad and me, obviously at my grandparents' house at that time. I realized that maybe cameras were harder to get a hold of and all that back then. I don't know. But I would say 80% of my memories are with Grandma. And then 15% with Grandpa, and maybe I gotta make a smaller number. But they don't really exist with my dad, and there's no good and there's no bad, which is so weird to me. It's so weird because, like, why would the memories? Obviously the memories were still clicking away, during that time period. But I don't know. That tells me they either weren't super meaningful, maybe, or they weren't bad. My grandma was pretty cool, and my grandpa was pretty cool. I really enjoyed I enjoyed both of them. My grandma was I think she's about 100% German, and the story goes, and I don't know if this is true, so you're just listening, but don't take it, is that my grandpa was in the war and met her. Anyway, they had about 6 or 7, 8 kids, a couple, 2 or 3 girls, and the rest boys. And when they lived back in Iowa, they actually lived in Edgewood, Iowa, and they had a lot of people have told me it was a variety store. Okay, I was also kind of under the impression it was kind of like a hardware store a little bit, but the thing that was also different is my grandpa and grandma, they sold TVs and radios. Like, that was a big part of that business then, and that's what they did for a living. I don't know much of how did they get to hot spring. That don't make any sense to me. I don't. But most of the kids were, most of their children were all raised in Edgewood and went to school, basically a couple not too far from where I live now. Yeah, and my dad, I saw a report card once or whatever or something, and the teacher called him Joey, little Joey or something like that in the comments. But anyway, I'm digressing. Let's go back to Hot Springs. So Grandma pretty much raised me, and I wasn't the only one that my grandma was raising or whatever. My grandfather's mom, so my great grandma, who was kind of way up in there at that point, required encouragement to eat, and just so she pretty much full time took care of both of us. They had a tremendous garden, and and I have lots of memories of being in that garden. I have my grandfather just absolutely was over the top creative in the landscaping, in the additions that he put on the house. Over the top. I mean, it was cool, and I got to be part of that. Probably because they were babysitting me. Probably. I mean, now that I think about it, but I never felt a burden. I don't know. I never, by either side, whether in the garden or there. And sometimes I would ride in the little wagon on the back of the the riding lawnmower kind of thing. And other times, Grandpa would have me hop in, and he, when he would wheel a load in the wheelbarrow, whatever it was, I was sitting on top. Yeah, and so there's very good. There's very good memories. They had grapes. They had more grapes than you could ever imagine. Like, they canned grape juice. We're not talking a little bit. We're talking gallons upon gallons of gallons. It wouldn't surprise me if I said 50 gallons a year. I don't know if they made wine, but they made, did the grapes. What is another memory I have? Grandma always was knitting or doing doilies. I think they're called doilies. But she was always crocheting. I have a lot of memories of her in a chair in her Bible. a lot of memories. Grandma was probably my very first influence, or what? Influence. Brought me around, introduced me to Jesus, and we would play. Not Connect Four. The cards. Connect Four, not Connect Four. Uno. We would play Uno all the time. And the other game that we played, I mean, I can't hours of doing it. And obviously I'm getting a little bit older as these things go on. But the other one was Yahtzee. We daily. And I don't know if my memory lines up. I'm pretty sure. I have to really stretch to think, because I remember laying there. I remember right there obviously they sold TVs at one time. So technology was always going to be a part of their lives, or at least Grandpa's life. So there was a big TV in the upstairs dining room, and there was also a big TV. And they were big, back then. And I want to say Dukes of Hazzard that I watched. And I feel like that's got to be around that timeline, because I was born in 76. Let's say this is 80. I'll have to look it up if I remember. But what I did watch for sure, because we had whatever it was, I don't know if they were tapes or discs, or I don't know what they used back then. I can't think. But like I said, Grandpa had satellite and had all the big satellite dishes. He was so far ahead of everyone, what the normal person, would have. But I remember watching Annie. I watched the crap out of Annie. And we're not talking the PC Annie, the new one. That one's so wrong. They're just trying to make it, let her be a drunk, let her be a drunk. Just let everyone be what they want to be. And, 100, 200, I watched it a lot. And I was thinking there was another movie. I'm really curious. I'm going to have to do some looking to see what format videos would have been on at around that time period in life. I'll tell you this is how cutting edge. We had remote control for the TV. It was cool. And you could push the buttons. There was only 4 buttons, and they made like a tone, a really weird tone. And one time I knew what this was called, but it would, ting, and the TV knew power on or power off or whatever, or volume up, volume down. Maybe you couldn't even turn on. I don't know. You had a couple choices. There was an organ, and Grandma played the organ. I'm just trying not to forget anything. One of the really cool things, like I said, they were both really kind of cutting edge. With whatever the kind of like I've described there. They had the technology, but they had a hydroponic system that Grandpa and Grandma helped some too. I would say Grandma did not do the lion's share. She probably 10% or something, but because she's taking care of Mom, taking care of the or Grandma or whatever, and the house and the meals, but that was really cool because they had this white coarse rock. And they grew tomatoes. That's all I remember is growing tomatoes in this room, and the pump would kick on, and it would flood. It would flood all the growing, and there was plastic. They were lined with plastic, and these tomatoes would grow up onto these vines. And then after it pumped so long, then it would drain back into the pit. And so I don't know. That seems pretty cutting edge. They had a yogurt maker where they actually made yogurt. And I'll tell you this, it doesn't taste anything like what you get out of the store. What else did they have that was just kind of over the top? One thing that was unique is my grandma every day, like she probably do two, maybe three of these a day. She did a measuring cup, the Pyrex measuring cups, the 2 cup ones, and she would fill it with water, and in all of our water there in Hot Springs. Now you can drink the water, I think, from the well or whatever, but Hot Springs has this really cool thing. And I remember this as a kid. You go downtown, into town, and the water naturally comes out of the ground, and they have these fountains, these like little filling stations, and so you would bring your containers and fill them, and that was all of our drinking water and cooking water. And there's a whole bunch of them in the hallway. They must have been, I can't see Grandma picking up a 5-gallon container, but they were at least 2-gallon. I mean, they were pretty good size, and there was a lot of them. And you'd pull up, and you'd only have to walk, like 15 feet, because they're kind of like close to the parking on the side of the street there. And people would pull up, and they'd fill up all their jugs, and then take them home and use them. Anyway, she put her water in there, and then she would put white vinegar in it, and she put it in the microwave. That's the only 2 ingredients. And I can't tell you the ratio, maybe 10% vinegar and 90% water. And she'd heat it up in the microwave. And I just remember that, like, because a couple times I tried tasting it. It's like, it's just, I don't know. So Grandma had a big loom. I don't know what this was for, making, like, I guess really big doilies, but it must have been like, actually she had 2 of them. Must have been like 6 foot wide or whatever, and you could make fabric or clothes. Grandma made all my clothes while I lived there, and on top of that, she didn't just make my clothes. I had GI Joe characters, but they were tall. They were like like Barbies, but more muscular. And she made all the clothes for my GI Joes. The coats and shirts and pants and shorts and well, she made mine too. And I remember one day we were at the fabric store or whatever, and she's looking at some fabric, and I think she asked me. I remember the thing, but I feel like she asked me because she showed it to me anyway, and it was definitely a print, and I probably said yeah. So she knew how much to buy, and next thing I know, I have a pair of shorts that are made out of this. And I wore those shorts like crazy. And everyone, everywhere I went, people said stuff about it, because it was that. I was called the wild man, because my shorts were just so wild, So 2 probably last things. I think some of this stuff is probably, important, is I don't know if Dad punished me during that time period. I have to think he did, since my grandma did. But I got, like, Grandma didn't mess around, and especially in my opinion for that age, especially by today's standards. But I would get spanked primarily with a wooden spoon. Sometimes I think it was a spatula or something. And and it hurt. It wasn't for jokes, you know. It was for real. And the the wooden spoons back then were kind of a little bit better than they are now. You know, they're not like IKEA. You know, how cheap and flimsy can we make it and still sell it? These are probably like real German wooden spoons. You know, the real deal. Mix cookie dough by hand with one of these things. You know, but it's kind of funny because the last beating that I got there by the wooden spoon, it broke over my ass. So we could say it was a defect in the spoon, or you could also realize that it it was for real. It was kind of interesting because Grandpa, and I didn't say what Grandpa did. Grandpa, uh, at this point, he either managed his own hardware store or he managed someone else's hardware store. But that's what he did. And I I have lots. He drove a lot of times. He drove a full size conversion van, and I have lots of memories because he would always. There was two ways to go back to home, and he would always take the kind of more squirrelier way. You know, the less, I don't know. His had more turns and bumps and stuff like that. And yeah, he'd always put on music, and we'd both just sing like crazy, you know. And he did not smoke, and he did not know that Grandma smoked. I was not allowed to tell that. So whenever I was with Grandma, and she was in a little Mazda, a little white Mazda. I don't know how I can still remember that, but I do. And she pretty much smoked anytime we went to town, which I think was probably reason to go to town more often than not. We went to Piggly Wiggly all the time, and I remember that, and shopping and with her. But the other place that well, I mentioned the fabric shop. There was that, but we went to church a lot, and I don't I can't hardly say they because I don't know I have no memories of Grandpa going. I don't remember, but Grandma did, and she would go quite a few times a week, and she always sat up in the balcony. Well, not we, or we did. We sat in there, and she would do the I want to say the Hail Mary. It's not that. The Rosary. She'd do the Rosary, and we would do that for a long time. I'm actually surprised that I was maybe as good as I was, but it's kind of funny because I took my wife. I can't remember if some of the kids were there or not, but we were down by the hot springs area, and not really, but we cut over, and I got to show. I could do this all from memory. I got to show the church. It took me two churches to find it. I'm like, yeah, I think this is it. But you got to remember, it's like 40 years, 45. It's a long time ago. And I'm like, I go inside. I'm like, no, this is not it. And we finally hit one. And as soon as I hit the parking lot, yeah, there's where we parked. Da da. Here's how you go up to the balcony. Here's the, yeah, like, oh, that was cool. And the Piggly Wiggly, I could locate that. I was trying to think if there's any. I couldn't locate like the hardware store because I that was a little bit kind of here and there. But Grandma she bribed me, I think it was the way, but to memorize the Lord's Prayer and some other stuff. She really did have an influence on me. And one thing I can tell you that, and I think this is probably my last thing, it has nothing to do, it's just a warning if you go to at least hot springs and you find grass, a lawn. There's things down there, they're called chiggers. Yes, I didn't swear. Chiggers, like CH, and then basically bad words. And I think they're invisible, but they are the nastiest little creature known to man. They do something. I don't know if it's bite you or drop a type of atomic bomb or what, but they only do it where there's tight things against skin. So, like in the old days, your whitey tighties, if you will, your Supermans, it's in those bands, right up at your crotch or anything that's laying there. It's in your sock line. But they're not exclusive to there, and it is horrendous. It's horrendous, and there's all kinds of old wives' tales of how to, you paint them with clear fingernail polish, all these little things, and it may make them stop because you will itch them till you have completely ripped open your skin. And that was pretty much my life. Why I lived there, because I was like tall. No, I was short. So I played in, right? And you're a slow learner. And the punishment isn't right away. They would also be like, if your balls were laying on anywhere, and they got all the way up the crack of your rear, I think I assume for girls, maybe here, your armpits. Oh, they look them up, seriously. Wikipedia, chiggers. So you can we had cans and cans of off, which is probably what made me damaged anyway. And you always put that on to go outside. I would just it would be a fog. They would put me in a fog of that. So, and I had an hour, and I know some of this, I apologize if it's not, benefit, if it doesn't provide benefit. I think my gist of hot springs, I would say, was love, but maybe don't eat the peanut butter off the mousetrap. And that kind of carries on and starts to grow. And I don't know what age I was there. I learned to tie my shoes there. I did go to like a preschool or something. I remember there. I don't know that I went into any school, but so I'm guessing what's night school take? Probably 2 to 3 years, depending on how fast you do it. I don't know. But pretty much once Dad graduated, which I don't remember. But on the next video, I'll pick up and you'll see it starts, changing pretty fast. And I think out of fairness, I wanted to paint the truth. I didn't want to just go, oh, this is all the things bad. Just like I'm going to also paint some of the things that I didn't help with. That I got to own mine. I'm not saying, but I'm going to do that too. So this will be a journal so that as my memory continues to deteriorate, that I can watch these and rediscover my past. So I wish everyone good luck. Good deal. Go ahead and look up chiggers. You'll learn something about a creature. And get yourself some of these hot cereals. Give it a try. I challenge you to get some and get through a box. Maybe over a year. It takes me like 14 days, 12 days. Goodbye.